When Man Meets Metal, Rise of the Transhumans. At the borderline of technology and biology, body hacking pioneers are defying nature to redesign their own bodies. Is this really the future? By Tim Adams. Earlier this year I went to an event in Austin, Texas, billed as a sneak preview of the evolution of our species. The bodyhackers conference, which took place in a downtown exhibition complex, promised a front row insight into the coming singularity, that nirvana foretold by science fiction, in which biology and technology would fuse and revolutionize human capability and experience. The headline acts of the conference were mostly body hackers, DIY experimenters who, in their basements and garages, seek to enhance their own flesh and blood with biometric implants and cognitive enablers. These brave pioneers were extending their senses, overcoming physical limitation, and daring themselves and the rest of us into the future. At least that was the idea. The reality of the convention was a little more mundane. It was overpriced and sparsely attended. Disparate and awkward groups of the pierced and the tattooed wandered between lectures about the ethics of body augmentation, and budget demonstrations of virtual worlds, past stalls flogging various kinds of neurotropic snake oil or enthusing over the transforming possibilities of magnets and LED lights inserted under the skin. Occasionally, over a long couple of days, there was a genuine spark of wonder, the demonstration of a vest that converted sound into multiple vibrations felt across the back, promising a new way for deaf people to hear, a drummer who had lost an arm, and had customized his own prosthetic that could now play like Buddy Rich, a woman, Moon Ribas, who had wired herself to experience tiny shifts in tectonic plates, and was converting those drummers into choreography. These latter experiments seemed to exist somewhere between art, medicine and counterculture. They shared a knowledge of the newly understood plasticity of the brain, and a utopian idea of technology, and were pushing that understanding in novel, homemade directions. They were, at least, the most convincing hints that this introverted subculture, which styles itself as transhuman, was sometimes knocking at the doors of perception just as determinedly as those early experimenters with hallucinogenic drugs in the last century. David Vintner, a British photographer, has been following this subculture for the past 2 years. He divides his pictures of transhumanists, some of which are reproduced here, into 3 groups: those who are working to extend life, those toying with implants as body art, and those attempting to make permanent changes to the human condition. The pictures capture precisely the ironies that were on display in Austin, Texas, the odd union between scientific innovators and garden shed fantasists. We set out at the beginning to photograph people in a domestic environment as much as possible, Vintner's collaborator Jem Fletcher tells me. These things are mostly happening in people's bedrooms. One of the inspirations for Vintner's journey into this culture was Professor Kevin Warwick, Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Coventry University, who back in 1998 was the first person to put a silicon chip transponder under his skin, that enabled him to open doors and switch on lights automatically as he moved about his department, and to declare himself cyborg. 4 years later Warwick pioneered a BrainGate implant, which involved hundreds of electrodes tapping into his nervous system and transferring signals across the internet, first to control the movements of a bionic hand, and then to connect directly and communicate with his wife, who had a BrainGate of her own. In some ways Warwick's work seemed to set the parameters of the body hacking experience, full of ambition, somewhat risky, mostly outlawed. The BrainGate system is now being explored in America to help some patients suffering paralysis, but Warwick's DIY work has not been widely taken up by either mainstream medicine, academia or commercial tech companies. He and his wife remain the only couple to have communicated nervous system to nervous system through pulses that it took 6 weeks for their brains to hear. It was a bit out there, Warwick told me last week. And though my papers get cited, I've not become a member of the Royal Society, or received any of the normal plaudits. If Warwick has cyborg disciples, they mostly exist among the body hackers, transhumanists and grinders that Vintner has photographed. I think they are often the ones now pushing the field, Warwick says. though they are taking a lot of risks sometimes by doing these things in their garage and not the lab. Speaking to the people in Vintner's pictures, you hear about some of those risks, but also the extent of new technological possibilities, and the current limits to them. We have become used to implants to fix medical problems, for diabetes, for heart conditions. And as a culture we have long accepted the therapeutic possibilities of plastic surgery. But the idea that we might augment our natural senses and abilities through surgery remains a difficult ethical question. Some of the people that Vintner has photographed have had their desire for the superhuman thrust upon them. James Young lost his arm and leg in a rail accident in East London in 2012. He subsequently enjoyed a degree of publicity when he won a competition offered by a computer gaming company to receive a bionic arm, laser-lit, and with phone charging ports and a personal drone attachment. 18 months on, Young has mixed feelings about the arm, which he helped to design with London-based prosthetic sculptor Sophie de Oliveira Barata. For all its gadgetry and futuristic style, the arm is heavy to wear and limited in normal function. He usually does without it. He is most grateful that the arm has led him into a new career as a TV presenter, partly from the interest it generated. He plans, however, to replace it with the model that can be properly attached to his bone, and eventually integrated with his neural intention. Though the arm was a great conversation starter, he has been adopted by the transhuman community. Young fears that augmentation will continue to be a marginal interest. Why would tech companies risk surgical solutions, he asks, when externalizing technology is much safer and cheaper? That is why people slice themselves up at home or in tattoo parlors or whatever. The corporate commercial risk is hard to address. Rob Spence, the cyborg, tells a similar tale. Nearly a decade ago he replaced the eye he had lost in a childhood accident with a video camera he could use to record and transmit real-time footage of what he was seeing. Spence had grown up on superheroes and wanted to fill the absence in his eye socket with the presence. Again he remains a lone pioneer of the procedure, which he developed and installed with the aid of friends at home. He thinks a squeamishness about the right to privacy of people being recorded is to blame, though he believes people will soon be more comfortable with the interventions like his. For me, the best example is always breast augmentation, Spence says. In terms of transhuman additions, it is like we are in the 60s of boob jobs. When certain kinds of things make people's lives better, like laser eye surgery or boob jobs, then eventually more people do it. They like not wearing glasses, or they like having larger breasts. We haven't reached that point yet. He sees the eventual integration of tech into our bodies as inevitable. There is a clear progression. First it was a big room at IBM, then it was your desktop, then your laptop or tablet, then your smartphone, and next the digital will be part of your body. The question, I guess, is at what point would someone lop off their arm and replace it with something bionic? It will get there, but it's a long way off. Over the years, Spence has talked to various commercial companies about developing applications for the cyborg, but eventually they all backed off. It is an odd product in that it raises issues both legally and medically, he says. People end up seeing it as, at best, an elaborate toy for one-eyed people. Neil Harbisson is more messianic about the possibilities of body hacking. Harbisson, who lives in Barcelona, was born with a rare ocular condition that only allows him to see colors and shades of gray. He had an antenna fixed into his skull by a surgeon friend in 2006. The antenna translates the color spectrum into musical notes and transmits the data to Harbisson through bone conduction. He sees color as sound. Blue is middle C. He views the antenna as an art project which designs his perception of reality. It is not the union of two senses but the creation of a new sense, he suggests, one that allows him to also see ultraviolet and infrared light. Again he encounters a lot of resistance to the idea that he is improving his sensory apparatus. People find it ethical to recreate pre-existing sense and pre-existing body parts, he says, but when it comes to new body parts and new sense it is something that people find unnecessary. I think that will change. people will start to see that the best way of improving the planet is to design and improve ourselves. If we all had night vision, for example, we would not have to use artificial light at night. We wouldn't need to light our cities. The more senses we have, the less energy we will need. To advance this cause, Harbison helped create the Cyborg Foundation, which acts as a reference point for young body hackers and transhumanists around the world. He himself feels he has evolved into a post-human condition with the addition of his antenna, which connects him, he argues, more closely with other life forms that share similar cognitive apparatus, bees, for example, which also see ultraviolet. Advertisement. He calls this awareness transspecies and compares it to the transgender movement. We have people who are interested in creating new senses and organs, and people who identify as transspecies are starting to realize they are not alone, though up until now they have not been able to say it aloud, in case people might laugh, he says. We have many of the same problems, as transgender groups. Bioethical committees did not historically accept transgender surgeries, and in our case they do not accept transspecies surgeries, for people who want augmentation. They worry about people coming out of hospital with an antenna sticking out of their heads and what it would do to the reputation of the hospital. But that will change. In the meantime, there are plenty of less radical possibilities for the transspecies curious to experiment with. Some, like Ren Rauber, only want the simple buzz of feeling a magnetic field and picking up a spoon, with an implant in their finger. What I do is not rooted in a grand vision for the future of humanity, Rauber has said. It's like a child playing around, saying, "Look what I can do, isn't this cool?" Cool. Other experiments are more trippy. The insect helmet created by a German collective called the Constitute uses externally mounted video cameras to allow wearers to experience different species' perceptions of the world, through the swivel eyes of a chameleon or the long face of a horse. Christian Zollner, who helped create insect, insists it is an art project, made with punk attitude and punk tools, not a tech-led design. It's an aesthetic playground for people to experience and witness the limits of their perceptions. Users often fall over. In Mark O'Connell's recent book-length adventure into the DIY cyborg world, To Be a Machine, he describes transhuman ambition as an expression of the profound human longing to transcend the confusion and desire and impotence and sickness of the body, cowering in the darkening shadow of its own decay. This longing had historically been the domain of religion, and was now the increasingly fertile terrain of technology. The people in David Vintner's pictures buy into this faith in different ways. James Young, who sees his futuristic arm as the beginning of a journey and not the end, is sanguine about the reality but hopeful about the implications. The day before we speak, he showed his limb to a class of 6-year-olds. They loved it, he says, and I was trying not to be too negative. They were saying, "Does it make you super strong?" And I was like, "Not exactly, but if it gets bashed, I can feel pain on it." At the very least, body hacking futurism acts as an inspiration to others. I have had lots of people contact me to say, "Thanks for being out there with your crazy arm, it makes me feel better about my boring peach-colored NHS1, says Young. We are realizing that giving someone a limb that is really ugly and impersonal is not the nicest thing to do maybe. And that is what is really great about this. I got to design it myself, James Young, prosthetic arm. At 22, James Young lost his arm and leg in a freak accident when he fell from a Docklands light railway platform under a train. After the accident, in 2012, he subsequently applied for and was chosen to receive a prosthetic arm inspired by Metal Gear Solid, one of the world's best-selling computer games. The arm featured a laser, a USB port in the wrist and a mount for a tiny drone. The arm was really made as an artistic project to explore the alternative functions that an arm might have. Those functions worked very well. But because of the nature of my amputation, it has proved kind of a burden to wear. It is very physically demanding. Advertisement. The project has helped me to understand that it is great to have alternative functions, but it was the core functions that you needed. Because it was created by artists, there was only so much integration with the body. I am now exploring the further integration, with a bone implant that will allow me to mount an arm onto my skeleton and to be controlled naturally, using brain signals. All of that is obviously very cutting edge, and the NHS can't afford it, so I've been crowdfunding for a year or so. I have £35,000 so far, about half what I need. If I'm honest, probably the main way the arm has changed my life is by opening conversations, and opening doors to what is actually possible. I can accept that I am never going to have a bionic arm as good as a human arm. But I am excited to contribute to that push to get it as good as it can be. I like to use the canvas of my body as an opportunity.